Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our first Green Heat Network Fund Meet the Projects event. It's great to see so many of you here today. We've got a really packed agenda today, and I'll run through that. But before we start, just wanted to touch on some housekeeping. Today we will be taking questions throughout the session, and you can do this by clicking on the Q&A icon, which you'll find at the top right hand corner of your window. You can type your question in, and you can post this with your name or anonymously, and we'll answer as many of them as we can today. If you see a question that you particularly like, you can like that question using the thumbs up icon, and we will ensure that we cover as many of those questions as possible today. We're using a platform called Teams Live, and this means that you can send questions through to us. The recording will be available after the session, and we will also be sharing the slides. If anyone has any issues throughout the session, please send through a question, and I will look at them as we go through the presentation today. So we're joined by a really fantastic lineup of speakers today. I will shortly be handing over to Ken Honeysett from Triple Point, who will talk a bit more about the Green Heat Network Fund and the market transformation commitments that some of our funded, well, all of our funded projects have signed up to as part of their application for funding. And then we will be joined by three of our recently funded projects. The Old Oak and Park Royal Development Corporation, Cheshire East Council and Equans. And as I said, we will have a Q&A session at the end of today. So without further ado, I will hand over to Ken.
Thank you, Sam. And thank you to all of you. I gather just before joining the call, we were up to 250 registered attendees this afternoon, which is extraordinary. I know my manners and I'll do my proper thank yous later, but it really is super to have you all along for what I hope will be a brilliant session. This is not a how-to webinar. We run those throughout the course of the year and we'll continue to do so. That's not to say, though, that there won't be some brilliant learnings from our investee projects that you're going to hear from this afternoon. This instead is a bit of a celebration. It's our very first funded projects webinar for the Green Heat Network Fund, a fund that was launched back in 2022. Launched after the conclusion of the HNIP, the fund has been hotly in demand. Pun absolutely intended. It started life as a £288 million capital grant programme, but the fund grew this year following the Green Day announcements back in March 2023. To date, we have provided some announcements of our first 15 projects, together representing more than £175 million worth of grant award. The map on the left is our greatest hits from those first 15. There will be further announcements, hopefully as soon as later this year. What you will hear from me, having said this is not an application webinar, I am going to tell you competition for funding has been incredibly high and increasingly so. If you are considering bringing forward an application at any point and you're not already engaged with one of our brilliant relationship management team, please do so as soon as you possibly can. As I said, 15 funded projects on the left. You're going to hear from 3 of those over the course of the morning, afternoon even. But before you do so, I wanted to give you a little bit of insight into the market transformation commitment. As Sam mentioned in her intro, this is one of the characteristics of the Green Heat Network Fund that we didn't have in the HNIP. It's a source of real pride for me and the team as we receive, assess and ultimately make grants to your brilliant projects. There aren't many limiting factors, it seems, anymore on the pace at which this market might grow over the course of the next few years. We've had an incredibly exciting few weeks and months. Only very recently, the Energy Act heralding regulation, shining a further light on the potential of zoning. We know quite how exciting the flight path for the industry could be. But the fact remains that if we are going to deliver on market potential in the timeline expected of us, then the rate at which heat networks are being developed out in the UK needs to increase tenfold. It really needs a transformational step change. And as a result of that, anyone who expects to benefit from grant funding is required to make commitments to transforming that market, to increasing the capacity in the market, increasing skills, hopefully increasing competition, hopefully driving down price, but most importantly, making sure district heating is able to deliver on its potential. We have market commitments in 3 broad sectors. All of this information, by the way, like all of our scheme materials, is available on our delivery partner website. In the context of infrastructure, the first of those key areas, well, the heat networks that are built under the fund are going to provide heating and cooling for many decades to come, and will be a critically important path in achieving net zero. As a consequence, then, not only do we care about what is being built, but also where and by whom. We expect open procurements to become the norm, and in support of that aim, are looking to promote the delivery of heat networks in a way that encourages new entrants to the market. It's not just about growing that existing supply chain, but encouraging new entrants into it. And we want to do that in a couple of ways. We expect all of our grant investees to provide an early sight to the market of everything that's intended to be procured, and provide details of when such procurements are likely to be happen. We'd love to do that in a number of ways. As a minimum, we expect really high levels of pre-market engagement, and several of you will have seen some very recent pre-market engagement exercises undertaken by a number of those early 15 projects already. We want people to run scheme promotions, and we also want people to contract on standardized professional terms. One of the proudest legacies of the GHNF, the Green Heat Network Fund's predecessor, was a set of standardized, templated professional sales, operations and maintenance contracts. We really want to see our grant awardees using one or more of those SOMS contracts at every opportunity. In skills, well, we're looking for our projects to identify opportunities to address the sector skills gap, to draw more people into the sector, to do it in a way that encourages fair and open recruitment. This is a young and growing business. We've got that rarest of all opportunities to draw people into a sector and focus on day one about growing a diverse, inclusive sector, not just one that has scale, but one that represents the kind of communities we expect to be serving over the course of the next few years. We also want to see people stimulating new jobs in the UK and new training opportunities. We're going to give you an insight soon into the kind of stats that have been generated in the first few rounds of the project about the types of numbers we're already seeing. And lastly, in the context of innovation, well, we want projects to identify ways in which they can enable investment in UK R&D, and then really helpfully to share the detail of some of those learnings and innovations with the wider market. Next slide, Sam, please. So what have we seen? Well, in job creation alone, we have seen applicants to the fund in the first 5 rounds commit, and we mean commit. These are pledges that we take seriously and hold people to account on over time, but to commit to creating 4,000 full-time equivalent job years of employment. The overwhelming majority of those are in the UK. That's the teal and blue sections of that pie on the right. The vast majority, in fact, are going to be local to the projects that are being created out. A good number of those 4,000, just under 40%, are in that technical category. those three columns you can see in the middle there, basic, technical and professional, are by reference to the government site on professional standards, links to which is in the market transformation commitment document I mentioned to you earlier. And really pleasingly as well, more than 300 apprenticeships will definitely be created. This information has been aggregated from applicants, successful applicants in the first 5 rounds. We're already benefiting in very many numbers of instances from the monitoring and reporting that's provided, not just on the procurement and operational characteristics of the scheme, but on the performance of against these commitments. Next slide, Sam, please. So you'll be thrilled to hear my bit is coming to an end. You are going to hear today from 3 of those successful projects. In life, as in heat networks, size isn't everything, but in the context of the market transformation commitments, proportionality is a really key and critical theme. And really helpfully, you're going to hear through an MTC lens, a market transformation commitment lens, from a small project, a medium project and a large project. I think I've got my running order right, and first up is Liam from OPDC, the Old Oaken Park Rural Development Corporation, a mayoral development company, talking to us about their open network with a capex of more than £100 million just for the first phase of the scheme. That puts the OPDC network firmly in that large camp. Following that, we will hear from Dan Griffiths of Cheshire East Council, telling us about the heat network that's being developed out in Handforth Garden Village, one of 17 garden villages and towns that was announced back by this current government in 2017, that in time is going to deliver almost 50,000 new homes across the country. That's a medium-sized project. It's medium-sized because it's bigger than £7.5 million in capex, but smaller than 15 million. And then through the lens of the MTC, at least, what we would classify as a small project with a capex of less than £7.5 million, you're going to hear from Amy Baker and the Equans team about their development out of Pudding Mill Lane. Of course, as an immediate adjacency to the marvellous Olympic Park project, it is far from small, but through that one particular lens, well, it meets that criteria for market transformation commitments. Lots to see and hear about today. Thanks again for coming along and joining us. Do please hang around for a Q&A at the end. Do please contribute to the chat as you hear from our speakers. I will see you at the very end. And I think it's over to Liam.
Thanks, Ken. My colleague Jason is actually going to kick off the presentation, and then I'll be taking over from him. So if I could transfer to Jason, please. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Liam, and thanks, Ken. I'm Jason Robinson from OPDC, Old Oak Park Rural Development Corporation, Director of Special Projects. And as you just saw, Liam, he'll be taking over the back half of our presentation. We are delighted to be in front of you today and really excited about being part of this program. To the extent that for us it is absolutely perfect timing, because some of you may have seen that we have just yesterday launched through the TfL procurement website a development and funding partner process for our energy network, our heat network for OPDC. So we can put all the links and so forth in the chat or in the follow-up information, but now is perfect timing for us, and so we're delighted to be in front of you to tell you a bit about the scheme. First slide, please. Keep on going. Great. So OPDC is a very large scheme straddling a number of boroughs in West London. It is a mayoral development corporation, and our key obligation and indeed aspiration is to secure regeneration in the area. As I said, we're straddling Ealing, Brent and Hammersmith and Fulham. and we are indeed London's largest opportunity area, covering, I think it's about 650 hectares. And over 20 years, we will be delivering circa 26,000 homes, 56,000 jobs, and 2.5 million square feet of offices and new industrial space. But that is by no means what we are only delivering. We're also renovating, refurbishing nearly 5 kilometres of the canals and lots of new public parkways, parks and landscaped areas. Very, very importantly for us, our timing is all around the transformational impact that HS2 coming down with its hub at Old Oak Common will provide as effectively a transport-led regeneration scheme, which we've seen on a number of fronts in London over the last 20 years can be very successful. So this map you've got in front of you gives sort of places us in the geographic positioning of West London. I'll go to the next slide where we can start getting into the detail about, from an energy perspective, how important the heat network is in fulfilling our aspirations and obligations across our local area energy plan. We have a mix of proposals. As you can see, what we'll be talking about today is the energy network specifically. And for us, this scheme is really, really groundbreaking and important, and it is one of the key elements, and I think quite a unique element, that we are drawing heat from data centres that are in our regional area, and then inflating that heat via energy centres for delivery into the residential and new development for Old Oak West. But we're not only doing that, we're actually bringing it forward in a timescale that allows us to bring energy into some of the local facilities. So, you know, we are really mixing that decarbonisation strategy into existing facilities as well as new development. Next slide, please. It is aligned with the Merrill targets of zero carbon by 2030. And not only that, it provides the opportunity of taking the pressure off the local energy networks. We're all, as developers and facilitators, we are all struggling with power across the capital. We are not immune to that in West London. And so by taking some of that power demand off through an energy network as opposed to an electricity supply is a fantastic opportunity. Similarly, when you balance that against the plethora of data centres in the industrial park, and you can see those, the purple ones, the existing ones, and the pink ones are the proposed, actually utilising the heat that comes from those data centres and then distributing it back into the regeneration and beyond, it makes absolute economic and environmental sense. The important thing to note is also Old Oak West, which is a proposal for a comprehensive development of the site. Actually, as I said before, is the second part of the energy supply network. The first part is to provide opportunities for existing users. Those existing users you can see on this plan that are dotted around the purple and light blue. It's a bit hard to see on this, apologies, but the teal, I think it is, the purple and the teal. So in terms of the benefits that we're deriving from the green heat and energy and green heat funding, we are getting circa 90% carbon savings, which is a phenomenal outcome. We're projecting that. It's a phenomenal outcome, supplying 80 odd gigawatt hours over 7 kilometres of pipe work, and very importantly gives us the expansion capacity beyond our own regeneration scheme back into our adjacent boroughs, and we're in discussions with them at the moment about how our procurement process that is now underway might be able to enable that expansion. So we're not seeing Old Oak and Park Royal as or Old Oak West indeed, as an island regeneration solely being served by the energy network, heat network. It's actually a much broader piece for us. Next slide, please. Into the nuts of how we are delivering the scheme, proposing to deliver. It's effectively a staged process where the grant funding alongside additional funding provided both within our own GLA family and other sources alongside our development and funding partner together will enable a SPV to be created. That SPV will be responsible for the delivery, and the development and the operation and maintenance of the network itself. And it will be complemented with waste heat supply agreements from the data centres, and then new supply agreements to our existing and future customers, including Old Oak West ourselves. That process we'll talk a little bit about in terms of the timing of the procurement, but the SPV mechanism gives OPDC an element of control to enable the meeting of all of our various environmental and carbon obligations to be met, but also gives our incoming development and funding partners a level of control so that they can take full operational responsibility, and then economically and commercially and socially we're all embedded into the same process and flying the same flag and achieving the same appropriate outcomes. The timing of the process is, as I said, we've literally just launched, and we would encourage everyone who is able and has an appetite to look on the TfL website to understand the nature of our two-stage process, which is first a supplier pre-questionnaire, which is what we've just launched. It will then be followed by a down select into a formal competitive dialogue tender process. That will finalise at the end of next year with the creation of the SPV. From that point, we move into what we call our development phase. That development phase is a co-working arrangement whereby the scheme and its design in detail will be procured and developed by the SPV, and then it moves into contract at the end of 2025, and we anticipate starting on site in 2026. I think I'm probably done, and over to Liam on some of the technical details. Thanks.
Thank you, Jason, and hi everyone. As Ken and Jason mentioned, my name's Liam Caulfield. I'm a Senior Project Manager at OPDC. Jason has described our strategy for the project and the reason the project came into existence, but I'm going to give you a little more detail on how the project is being delivered. It all starts on the left-hand side of your screen with the data centres. They are essentially large industrial buildings filled with computers, creating vast amounts of heat. There are a number of ways that data centres can be cooled, but in our context, the data centres utilise a fluid-based cooling system. In a world without our networks, the data centres would release their waste heat into the environment, utilising their waste heat rejection system. However, our proposal is to extract that waste heat through plate heat exchangers into our ambient network, where it's transported to the energy centre, at which point heat pumps will increase the temperature of the heat and transport it through our low temperature hot water network to our customers. Next slide, please. We're currently still refining the requirements of our energy centre, but we expect it to be a 2-storey structure, approximately 800 metres squared, with a requirement for 3 thermal stores with a minimum of 600 metres squares of capacity. The current programme requires the land for the site of the energy centre to be available by Q4 2025. In the right-hand corner, there are some examples of what a modern energy centre can look like. Those familiar with the Olympic Park in Stratford will recognise the energy centre there. Thanks. I know we don't have huge amounts of time, so I won't say too much about the challenges the project faces. They'll be fairly similar to those faced by all projects trying to deliver a new heat network in an urban environment. But we're working to de-risk these items as much as possible now and through the procurement process to provide comfort to the market that this is a viable and deliverable scheme. Next slide, please. This slide shows our programme for the commercialisation phase of the project. The top half of the slide shows our progress through the critical path. And as Jason said, I'm also pleased to announce that we successfully launched the SSQ phase of our procurement. So if you're on the call and would like to be involved, please look us up. We have a fantastic procurement manager who's ready to support you. In parallel with the procurement, we're progressing some key work streams. Sorry for going back to the last slide. Thank you. Yeah, we are progressing some other key work streams, including design, negotiating heads of terms with data centers and all major customers. We're undertaking land searches and GRP surveys to inform our network design, as well as engaging Network Rail and TfL. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is my final slide, and we wanted to touch on the market transformation commitments that Ken made earlier and that this project has made. This is just a snapshot of how our project will deliver on the three main commitments. Firstly, we're working towards our infrastructure commitments by having developed and are delivering a fully concession contracts, regulations compliant and open procurement for the market to engage in. On our skills commitment, we will ensure that the Forge, a partnership set up by OPDC, the London boroughs of Brent, Ealing and Hammersmith and Fulham to support businesses, job seekers and local communities, will be embedded into the project. And finally, our innovation commitment. What we're proposing here will be an industry first for the United Kingdom. There are examples in Dublin and Scandinavia, but we hope that by successfully delivering this project, it could become a model to be rolled out across the project. Thank you.
Thanks, Liam. Thanks, Jason. I'll just hand over now to Dan from Cheshire East.
Thank you, Samantha. Fine. Just I'll go through the. Sorry, I am Dan Griffiths. I'm a major projects program manager for Cheshire East Council. Cheshire East Council is seeking to take forward a heat network at the Handforth Garden Village, the Garden Village at Handforth. It's one of our major strategic projects, and we're seeing certainly the heat network as a way of safeguarding and adding value to the work that we're doing around that garden village. So I want to flick forward. The whole concept of Handforth Garden Village really is to create a sustainable community, just like the other garden villages that are happening across the country. We're very much seeing this as an exemplar project, not just within Cheshire East, but we're hoping for it to be an exemplar project for the country. So we have a grand vision. I won't read it out, but you can see there that we want to create a lovely place, and we will do. In terms of where the village location is, just those who don't know Handforth from the infamous lockdown videos, it is just south of Manchester. It's on the border really, Cheshire East and Manchester, so it's part of the sort of Manchester economic geography, but it's certainly Cheshire. It's quite close to areas like Wilmslow, etc. So and also quite close to the airport. So that's what it is an urban extension, effectively. Just to flick on forward. Right. Just in terms of the actual site itself, it's bordered by a couple of sizable A roads. The link road to the airport is to the north, and the A34 major road going south from Manchester to the west. The land is primarily owned, and this is maybe a slight difference from a lot of other heat networks and garden villages, that the land is owned by the authority primarily. There's a couple of other third parties, but the authority owns most of the land and is taking this project forward as one of its major projects. So as you can see there, the sort of light blue is areas that we own, but there are these smaller pockets around. So obviously we are working with those landowners. In terms of the kind of layout of the village, there's a graphic showing the layout next. So it has a mix of uses. On the site there is through school health centre. It's a full urban extension really, and so you can see the kind of layout. It's relatively low density compared to some, however, with a higher density core around the access road, which you can see, which is about halfway down the site on the western side. You can see that's the yellow circle that's where the access route is into the site. Then that's the main spine road that we're building out as a first activity. In terms of numbers, just flicking forward, we've got 1,500 houses on there. There's 175 extra care units. There are employment uses on the site, local shops and restaurants on there as well, a village pub, as you would need to have, and a through school, and obviously the green infrastructure associated with it. So it is a fully formed new urban extension. So what we are intending to do, so going forward, is effectively put sustainability into the heart of this. There's a whole range of initiatives that we're working on, and this has been an integral part of the planning permission for the site. And the final point there obviously is around the district heating network, the heat network. And so what we're actually looking towards doing is we are effectively have a 3-phase approach with Handforth. So there's a proposed heat network here that has an energy centre. You can just about see probably, which is a green triangle, green rectangle, just at the top left-hand corner. So the energy centre is in that location, located primarily because it's close to an existing building. There's a large gym on site close by, so the form actually works quite well, being close to there. And then we have a network which flows out into individual development plots. Now, some of those plots, obviously, so those plots are ours, or around, and some are other developers, but it's primarily ours. And those plots will be done on a will be procured on a concession basis. So as those happen, we can build out the heat network into those individual plots. So there's three phases there that we're looking at with the Green Heat Network Fund. Is the area in the kind of salmon colour. That's the first phase. The first phase is standalone. It stacks up on its own right. However, we would be looking towards expanding out into the blue and the yellow areas as those start to be developed as part of the wider garden village. There's obviously a phasing with the garden village itself, and we're mirroring that. Just flick forward. Fine, so saying that in terms of main characteristics, it's the phase 1 only, which is primarily on council-owned land. There's a small area which isn't, but we will be embedding those connections into the development agreements that we'll be preparing for the site. That's the plan. There are 665 dwellings on the first phase, including the school, the extra care, the hotel, the pub, and some light retail. So it's a good mix of uses on the site. It'll be supported, or basically it'll be run on the basis of a open loop ground source heat, just ground source project with electric backup. So quite sizable total thermal demand over the 15 years. It's actually a 1 megawatt ground source heat pump that we'll be looking towards installing with a borehole field to the north of the energy centre, as you can see on that diagram there. One of the primary things we're actually working through currently is the consenting strategy with the Environment Agency around those. So the heat demand in the first phase is around 6 gigawatt hours per annum, distribution length about 2.5 kilometres. And I say the energy centre located on council-owned land and identified within the master plan. We still require planning for that, but that's something that we're also working on currently. And there is this potential to expand onto the rest of the site. So in terms of financials, we're only looking currently at phase 1, as a total value around 12.6 million, 5.7 million to be developed from what is associated with the generation, and 6.9 around the distribution. We've been awarded 2.6 million from Green Heat Network Fund, of which 680 is around commercialisation, which we're currently working through. So the consenting strategy, the work around the legal side, and also the work around planning in particular. It has an IRR of just under 6%, even with the Green Heat Network Fund. So as you can see from this, it is very much seen to be a council-led project. It's a public sector-led one there. We are leading the development of the whole garden village, and therefore it is consistent with that in terms of us leading this. We're not anticipating at the moment that that IRR will improve significantly, but obviously the financials are being reviewed as part of commercialisation. As I'm sure you understand, that things are very fluid in terms of financials currently with heat networks. It's going to be establishing, as part of the conversation, so establishing an SPV for the site. One of the complications with the SPV is the fact that we will have a management company for the garden village itself to look after the garden village going forward. So one of the complications is around how we tie the SPV for the heat network in with our management company, and that's something that we're currently working through. Obviously, we don't want to have too many companies on site with different sort of overlapping responsibilities, really, so it'd be good to try and get that streamlined. And I say finance through the connection charges and heat sales, but all this is being reviewed. So in terms of benefits, for us, we're obviously seeing this as part of our carbon reduction side. The borough has a target to be carbon neutral by 2045. We also have a target for the council itself to be carbon neutral by 2025. So that's the other side of the work which I'm doing. So there's huge carbon benefits there for us. Importantly for us, it's about safeguarding customer heat costs. We're very acutely aware in terms of how we can help and support those new residents that'll be coming onto the garden village. Importantly, and as I mentioned before, around future-proofing the developments and reducing some of the infrastructure costs, particularly around the grid capacity required for the site, and trying to reduce that. And obviously also the economic benefits, which leads into the market transformation side, really. As a key council project, a major project of the authority, we are absolutely committed to utilising this funding and utilising this project as a way of stimulating the market, not just locally, but also obviously nationally. We are subject to public procurement regulations, but we make sure that we go above and beyond as where we can around an open and fair procurement. So in particular around using social value. And as an authority, we can use social value as a way of driving additional benefits. So certainly in terms of wider environmental improvements, making sure that the contractors, etc., and the work is done in the most environmental and carbon reduction way. And also importantly around local economic benefit and job creation. So ensuring we tie in with apprenticeships and tie in with companies locally if we can. So there's a huge area of work there for us to do and embed as we go forward. We are engaging with the community and key stakeholders around the heat network. Obviously, local councillors have been involved and strategic councillors have been involved in the planning process, and the heat network has been very much an integral part of that process there, and making sure they're aware of the opportunities around the heat network and making sure they're bought into it, and there's a lot of support for this locally. And finally, the last thing which we've been doing as well is trying to look at any areas of innovation. Unfortunately, Cheshire East doesn't have any universities itself, but we are surrounded by them. So we have worked with a number of universities so far, so the University of Birmingham around a lot of the geothermal resource that we have within Cheshire East, and we're having a look and seeing how we can utilise some of that expertise onto this site. We've worked also with Salford University. They have a very renowned smart cities section there, and they've been working with us and helping us around the garden village. So as part of that market transformation, we are looking to make the most of this project. And that's pretty much me.
Great, thank you so much, Dan. Just hand over now to Amy.
Hi, nice to meet you all. I'm Amy. I work as a project development manager within Equans's urban energy team, and I'll talk to you a bit around kind of being an existing network on the transition to becoming a decarbonised heat network as well. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this project really came about kind of from two different means. So looking at it again, as I say, from an existing network where we currently have over kind of 20 kilometres of buried network already in place and a predominantly gas-led scheme. One of the things that we really want to start doing is looking at decarbonising and looking at how we can do this. And then it also kind of married up with the timings of a large extension to the district heating network that we really wanted to make as an organisation, but we're kind of falling a bit short. So when we put the two together, it really made sense to kind of look towards the Green Heat Network Fund to kind of support in getting additional connections that would be able to what's termed sleeved heat under the Green Heat Network Fund and decarbonise them all together. If I have the next slide, please. So essentially, as a kind of bit of a roadmap, so as I say, we kind of started thinking about this back in kind of 2022, early 2022. And we've been on this decarbonisation journey for a while now. So we've got our partnership with the London Legacy Development Corporation and Westfield, who are the joint overarching concessionaires of the East London Energy District Energy Network. And so we've been working really closely with them for the past 2 years to come up with an idea of how we could decarbonise the heat network, and a bit of what we refer to as a Plan A roadmap, which in this case is predominantly kind of an electrification and roadmap, electrification and heat pump led scheme. So kind of following on from that, we really wanted to identify kind of what projects would be a priority to look at, and ones that could utilise existing waste heat sources, preferably within the existing energy centres. And so from this, we identified that within the Stratford City Energy Centre, where there's both cooling and heating demand, there's a lot of kind of additional waste heat from the cooling network that could potentially be fed back into the heating network via a heat pump. So we've installed a water source heat pump over in that energy centre, and again are looking at whether or not that could be replicated either still within the Stratford City Energy Centre or over at the other Kings Yard Energy Centre as well. So once we had that kind of project that we really wanted to progress and initiate, we then obviously kind of agreed the investment into it through our board and through agreement with the London Legacy Development Corporation and Westfield, and also put in the application to the Green Heat Network Fund around kind of helping to fund both that big extension, which is over 1.5 kilometres in total, and then also the additional heat pump to go into the Stratford City Energy Centre. So from that, the project that's actually progressing the quickest at the moment is the heat pump installation, which Bill will talk about in a bit more detail later. But we've already got the tender exercise completed. It's already on site and it's going through its kind of final stages. So for us, it's been a real lesson in terms of kind of decarbonising the existing network and kind of understanding how to integrate this new piece of technology within the kind of bounds of the heat network itself. So we're really pleased that that's going quite well. We're waiting on kind of a few final pieces, so final electrical design sign off, and then a 28-day window of testing is yet to be completed. But the heat pump's kind of moving forward really well. And then once the actual extension to the heat network is built out, we're expecting over kind of 750 new homes to be connected. As kind of my predecessors were saying, the route's they're not without its challenges. So we're going through some kind of quite complicated areas. So we're going kind of under the big Greenway sewer, under the DLR. So we've got a lot of engagement with Network Rail in terms of getting basic asset protection agreements in place. A lot of kind of coordination with the London Legacy Development Corporation in terms of kind of the easements required as well in order to kind of reach those sites. So we're hoping to progress that and get that all kind of up and running in the next 12 months as well, to make sure that we've kind of got the heat pump and then also got the two kind of really key plots in terms of delivering the big extension from that existing heat network as well. But as I say, we're currently in delivery, so I'm going to hand over to Bill, who's who'll be able to introduce himself and speak a bit more about how the heat pump installation is going at the moment.
Hi, my name is Bill Greenwood. I'm a site manager for the projects team for Equans Urban Energy. So we've installed a water source heat pump in our Stratford City Energy Centre, utilising the space for a future boiler installation. We've utilised the space by installing a mezzanine with a chiller underneath and then the two water source heat pumps with associated pipe work in that area. So we've had about 6 to 14 operatives on site at one time. That's about it really. It's going really well. We're going into commissioning stages at the moment, and hopefully a few more in years to come.
And then, as Ken mentioned before, we're classed as a small project under the Green Heat Network Fund, but it doesn't mean that we're not doing anything else around our market transformation commitments. So in terms of like the procurement that everyone's mentioned before, we made sure that the procurement for the heat pump and the extension to the heat network is all competitive and in line with the market transformation commitments. But one of the benefits, I suppose, of being an existing network is we have a lovely energy centre and a lovely visitor centre as well, which we're really making the most of in terms of we've got a couple of universities that are connected to the network already, and a lot of interest actually in kind of other organisations. So we've recently hosted kind of visits around the energy centre and explaining kind of district heating to the Energy Institute Young Professional Networks, and that event actually sold out in I think it was a day or so. So it's really kind of exciting to see that there's so much kind of interest and appetite for people to kind of look at these existing district heat networks, and so we're really trying to kind of make sure that we facilitate them and kind of show people around. So it's not just being university students. We've done resident open days. We've got kind of park life volunteers who show people around the Olympic Park if you've been down there before, and many other people. So if you are interested, just reach out. And we've also done a couple of work experiences over the past summer, again, learning about the East London Energy Network and decarbonisations. We've had a couple of people sit in our decarbonisation or our project development teams, learning about kind of district energy, and some of them have been kind of feeding back some really great initiatives that we've been looking to take forward as well, and providing some really good insight as well from their kind of learnings and what they've been researching. So we found it a really kind of good beneficial thing that we've been doing. I'll hand back to you.
Great, thanks, Amy. So now we've got some time for questions from the audience. We've had quite a few come through so far. I'm going to ask quite an open question to the speakers, and feel free to jump in or raise your hand if you want to take it. But we've heard about a range of different commitments being made to help transform the market. As the guidance sort of sets out a high level framework for setting these commitments. Really interested to understand how each of the projects went about choosing their MTCs, and why they focused on the particular areas that they did. If anyone wants to take that one first. Yeah, go on, Jason.
Happy to. Yeah, thanks. Look, the approach that OPDC took, which is still very flexible to new opportunities, is that when we looked at the opportunity area and we looked at the scheme as a whole, the sheer weight and number of data centres that had excess heat that were simply exhausting into the atmosphere seemed to us to be an obvious opportunity. When we looked overseas, there, as Liam described, there's a number of benchmark schemes that we've looked at, and we've done a whole engineering analysis with our team as to the various opportunities that were immediately available, and so utilising excess heat from the data centres was a quick win for us. It's not uncomplicated, as we described. It's going to take some time to get through procurement, public processes, and to align all the objectives of both private and public sectors. But effectively, our decision to focus on the heat source side of things was a first pass, first case, immediate win for us. We are very open to other decarbonisation strategies, and in fact, as we talked about in the presentation, we're looking at a mix across the scheme. But for us, there was an immediate opportunity. Existing facilities, existing businesses that were willing and able to commercially contract with us to take the excess heat that is there now in data centres, but also in data centres that are being built. So it's the first part of a broader decarbonisation strategy is sort of the key message I'd like to give.
Great, thanks, Jason. Does anybody else want to come in, Dan? Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. I mean, I think we had a couple of areas where we were really focusing on. I mean, the fact that the authority has declared the climate emergency, has targets for 2045 for the borough to be carbon neutral, and for ourselves to be carbon neutral as an organisation by 2025. We're very keen on some of the infrastructure commitments around the carbon footprint and making sure that worked there. So we're very much focused on trying to make that happen and trying to embed it through our procurement processes, and in some ways actually utilising this project as a way of embedding this within perhaps quite a lot of our infrastructure programs going forward. So we've been working with our procurement team around making sure that that we have the right questions in the ITT, get those honed down. We can utilise this so locally to make sure that that's embedded going forward. And perhaps I could add some good practice to other authorities. The other thing we have been looking at as well, actually, just FYI, we've been looking at all the investments that we're doing as an authority and doing carbon accounting for all of those projects, so we can make sure that anything coming forward has carbon at its heart. The other area that I say that we are quite focused on is around the sort of skills side, really, and it's trying to make sure that we do get the biggest benefit, really, in terms of skills training and local employment opportunities, especially for people within Cheshire East and within the facility. And obviously, that's a particular critical sort of added economic benefit for us, really. I mean, because we are very much seeing Handforth Garden Village as a transformational activity within Cheshire East. This doesn't happen very often, these size of developments within a borough like Cheshire East, so we have to really make the most of it. It's slightly different from our colleagues in London, perhaps, but we really need to use this as a lever to try and get a lot of that activity happening, and hopefully happening in a way that can support the wider rollout of some of these technologies across the rest of the borough and across the rest of the north. I mean, we have a huge retrofit challenge within Cheshire East and within the north there. So, some of these skills are highly transferable. Let's try and build the markets as a way of enabling those wider issues to happen.
Fantastic, thank you, Dan. Amy, did you want to come in as well?
Yeah, I'll just jump in quickly as well. In terms of ours, obviously, kind of having the existing network there is a really kind of great launch pad, I think, as well, and having the existing team already working on the network is kind of great to be able to then bring people in terms of kind of like you were saying, in terms of the skills and kind of the learning, and trying to kind of bring people in early and kind of get them up to grips with heat networks. Like you say, I think we always talk about the amount of people that we're going to need, not only now but in the future. So I think we're trying to use kind of especially what we have already to try and get people interested and get people kind of knowing about the sector as soon as possible. And then, like you said, with the procurement and everything like that, making sure that where we can source kind of local and try and manage all the kind of skills and procurement and everything like that.
Great, yeah, definitely about trying to build those local supply chains and local skills. Moving on to a slightly more technical question now for OPDC. Will the network be supplied entirely from data centres or heat from data centres? Is there a plan to incorporate additional technologies? And you mentioned heat pumps. Do you know how many heat pumps you'll be deploying, and the estimated thermal capacity of those?
Yep.
Jason, one for you, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. So I think in terms of the first part of the question, it really comes back to the broader mix that we're trying to establish in terms of the total decarbonisation strategy in the energy area plan. The issue around the number of the heat pumps is still being established. We won't have them fully developed at the moment, or we don't have them fully developed at the moment. The reason is because we want to work with our incoming development and funding partners to establish those. So if it wasn't clear in the presentation, the stage of design that we're at is relatively conceptual, although we are continuing in parallel with the procurement process. And we didn't want to get too advanced for the specific reason that we want to make use and leverage the innovation that the market can bring to the project. So as is normal in sort of these type of procurement processes, we're taking it to a certain point, and then the SPV that is created with our incoming partner will take the detailed design, and that's where the heat pump and all the other detailed specification elements will be defined. So it's a little bit early to have the answer for that right now, but it will be there by the time we need it.
Great, thank you. Question for Dan, I guess in a similar sort of vein. You mentioned that your backup heat source was electric. what heat source are you using for that? What technology are you using?
So my understanding is that there are going to be electrical boilers with on there. So there's a couple of I think it's about 2.5 megawatts of electric boilers, which we're looking towards providing as backup to the main ground source. The initial phase is a couple of 0.5 megawatt ground source heat pumps.
Thank you. And talking of heat pumps, and I think a question for all of you. We're seeing emissions associated with the grid coming down. Do you all think that heat pumps can still deliver carbon savings when you're looking at marginal emissions factors? There's some impressive statistics across the various slides around carbon savings. Does anyone want to comment on that?
I can go first.
Yeah, only go, Amy.
Yeah, so obviously we're looking at kind of a lot of an electrification or heat pump led decarbonisation roadmap, and I think, like you mentioned, the trajectory of the grid going down is kind of what's not driving, but a factor in that. I know we're also thinking about kind of looking at thermal storage opportunities and kind of, again, renewables to potentially offset some of those residual emissions. But I think like I say, there's kind of a lot of carbon savings to be had from the heat pumps, especially kind of in the current climate. So that's kind of definitely where we're still focused and putting a lot of effort in at the moment.
Great, thank you. Did anyone else want to add anything to that?
I would say sort of currently, obviously, in terms of looking at the options that we've looked at, I mean, ground source heat pumps seem to be still the best option for us going forward. So I don't know if I started there or not. So we've looked across the options as we were previously. Of the developments of the ground source heat pump seem to be the one with the greatest benefits, and I still think it has got the greatest benefit there. So if someone else comes up with a new and novel technology to increase carbon savings, we're all ears.
Great, thank you. Oh, sorry, Jason, did you want to come in?
Just very quickly, I was just going to say that at the moment, the current projections for our energy heat supplied network is that it will facilitate the development pretty well in its entirety. But as I said, we are still looking at other alternative options, whether that be for redundancy or alternative use. So yeah, those sorts of things are still in play for us.
Right, yeah, and I think one of the great benefits of heat networks is that they can be flexible as new technologies or opportunities come down the line. I guess moving a bit away from the technology specific angle, looking more at the sort of team and the capacity needed to deliver one of these projects. One of the questions is one of the attendees is really interested to understand sort of how much staff capacity is needed to develop these proposals, and how big a team do you need in order to pull off projects of these various scales. So I might take each project in turn. So Jason, as you're on screen, what's the sort of size of the team that you're working within at the moment?
We have an internal OPDC team, obviously made up of the people on this call, but also other infrastructure and specialist entities. But we ostensibly outsource through our consultant and advisory teams all of the various technical, legal, commercial elements. In terms of the size of that team, it is, I probably wouldn't want to put a number on it right now because it ebbs and flows with the workflows that we're on. But what we will be doing is working with the incoming development and funding partners who will have their own teams. And I'd suggest those teams would fluctuate through development, delivery, and then operational phases. So I don't think I'd be drawn on an exact size of numbers of resources, but it'll fit the size of the network and the staging of the project in its various stages. For us, this is a 40-year project. It is made up of 5 stages. The first phase is with existing facilities that we're transferring our heat to. The following 4 phases are all within Old Oak West. So each of those phases will have different team makeups, whether it be on the commercial development or delivery and operations side.
Right, yeah, I can imagine it will change over time as needs come about.
Yeah.
Amy or Dan, any sort of insight around sort of size of teams or capacity?
Yeah, I'm happy to go, but I mean, similarly, it's quite difficult to kind of quantify exactly kind of how many people as a private organisation that looks after kind of multiple heat networks. I think we've got about kind of 150, but that ranges all from kind of, like, say, commercial to project management to operational staff. So it's quite hard to say kind of exactly how many, but it's not a kind of small number that work on the East London Energy Scheme on a day-to-day. And then, like you say, it's kind of, especially now we're moving into more decarbonisation, it's kind of, is there additional staff and upskilling kind of needed there? And as you grow out from that respect and actually do the extensions, there's obviously a lot of kind of resource that's required to actually project manage something like that. So like I say, it's a bit hard to say exactly, but ebbs and flows.
Yeah, I think it's there's also a slightly different dynamic with local authority. There's also a slightly different dynamic with local authority led scheme. I mean, we've been lucky in Cheshire East that we actually got ELENA funding from the European Investment Bank previously, and that facilitated a lot of technical assistance funding for us to be able to do a wide range of environmental sort of energy projects. I think the EIB funding is still actually technically available to local authorities, even though we've left. But I think it's something that I always say in front of an audience is, if there's any opportunity for something similar in the UK around a sort of a technical assistance pot for local authorities, it'd be very, very welcome. So we've had that funding previously. We've cut our teeth around heat network optimization for Alderley Park, which is a big mixed-use industrial area in the borough. We've done work around urban heat networks around Crewe, and now the Handforth is kind of the next iteration of this. So we've been quite lucky to have a reasonably stable team of around, I mean, to be honest with you, probably only about two FTE though with the authorities, not a huge team. But we've also been able to build capacity within our enabling services, so legal and finance and others around us who are there to help and support us, because that's really important. I mean, they need to be brought along, they need to understand what's going on. So we have the kind of resources available, but we do, just like the others, is obviously we then contract in additional resources to be able to do the detailed technical work. As I say, I'm not a technical heat network specialist. You know, I'm a project manager across a range of carbon projects there. So we do rely upon that. And I think I noticed in the chat as well, there's someone saying about where do we sit. For us, we very much sit within economic development. This is an economic development project ultimately around the regeneration around Handforth, and this is very much sits within that, even though it has a kind of carbon environmental slant to it. We sit within economic development.
Great, thanks, Dan. That was going to be my next question to you. So
thank
you for thank you for covering that one off. Quite a few questions in relation to procurement. I'm probably not going to cover all of them. But Jason, Liam, another question for you. How far have you got in terms of agreeing heads of terms with the data center operators, providing access to heat, and those sort of those negotiations?
Yep, happy to fill that. We are in detailed commercial negotiations with both data centres and also commercial entities who will take the heat from the data centres in our phase one. Our phase one businesses, we actually have a list of nearly 20 of them that we're both targeting and in detailed conversations. And we, unfortunately, for the purposes of answering your question, we have NDAs established and we can't go into a lot of detail, but it's incredibly important for us, as I'm sure everyone will appreciate, that the terms of the supply agreements, whether it be offtake or customer, need to be at a level of certainty for us to finalise the procurement process with our incoming development and funding partners. So, you know, we're running parallel work streams, not just the technical and the legal and the procurement process, but also on the commercial side, we are negotiating under NDAs with terms on the supply side for the data centres, but also on the customer side for our phase one. The other thing to add to that is obviously within OPDC, we have an element of control on the delivery of Old Oak West, and Old Oak West, which is currently going through formal approvals, will be the second, third, fourth, and fifth stage customers of the scheme. So those commercial negotiations are underway as well.
Great, thanks, Jason. And two questions that are similar, I think, for you and Dan around. Is it anticipated that you're going to be procuring D&B or full DBOM basis, or a separate O&M contract? Do you have any thoughts at the moment as to how that might be structured, or is it still under discussion?
I can answer that, I think. It's,
Yep, thanks.
I mean, there is still obviously, I mean, things can change, and we're obviously going through the SPV model currently, and that may influence it. The way that we've normally run these types of projects like this, that we would effectively do a two-stage DBOM. So we would do the design and build, but the operate and maintain will be a separate contract, but within the same procurement. It's so that we make sure that there's consistency across both the build and the operation, especially for the first 3 to 5 years. It tends to be that's the time for the initial phase. But there's a contractual split between the two, because obviously we need to make sure that the D&B contract is finalised. That's typically how we do it, and that's likely to be the case.
Great, really interesting. Jason, from your side?
Yeah, so for us, we've basically got D&B contracts that will be managed by the SPV, post-SPV creation. They will be in two parts, one for the data centre connections and the second for the energy centres and the customer networks. Beyond that, we will also have our OM and OHNM contracts and customer service and billing contracts all separately procured but in parallel.
Fantastic, thank you. I'm going to go back to some more technical questions now. So the first one being, are there any significant environmental permitting constraints in relation to utilising heat pumps in heat networks? Has anyone come across any challenges with the heat pump deployment? Amy, I guess given that you've already installed your heat pump, is there anything that would be useful to share with the audience?
I guess the one other benefit for us is we also have electric chillers in the Stratford City Energy Centre, which uses ammonia as a refrigerant. So we have a lot of the kind of permitting requirements that's already in place. But when we were choosing the refrigerant for this heat pump, we didn't go with ammonia. So I think on kind of each individual basis, it's on a kind of case by case. So for us, I think installing it within the bounds of kind of an existing energy centre, which we already have a lot of the kind of pieces to, is a benefit. I think if we were doing another heat pump kind of outside of that, then there might need to be additional kind of considerations. But I think for us, yeah, there wasn't really any kind of issues or challenges from that perspective.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. No challenges. Fantastic. Jason and Dan, I think probably quite early days, but any challenges you've come across?
Well, the only thing which I'd add in terms of, it's not necessarily around the refrigerants actually used there, it's the sort of challenge will be around the sort of borehole consenting strategy, and that's something that we're acutely aware of, and we'll be working through with the Environment Agency to make sure that we get that, we get the design right, and we get the boreholes right as we're there, because we're going down to around 100 metres for the boreholes there. So that's a consenting issue for us, and that's something which we have to overcome soon to ensure that we can get those consents required.
Thank you. Just seeing any others that we haven't touched on. Dan, you may have touched on this, so apologies, but what forms of ground source or geothermal heating are you accessing? Are you using deep bores or energy piles?
Well, it's 100-meter deep, 100-meter bores that we're using for this. The total scheme requires four bores there, but obviously for the initial phase it's 2 that we're looking at currently. So that's what we're doing there. So I always have to mention deep geothermal, just FYI. There is actually a deep geothermal resource quite close by, but it's not something I think we can yet tap into. It might cost us a little bit too much money to be able to get down there and find out what's there. It's about 4 kilometers deep. So perhaps in a couple of decades' time, when we have a huge heat network, we might just go down there and see if we can extract it from there. But not for the moment.
We'll keep our eyes out for more information on that in the future. So I guess looking back, you've now secured GHNF funding. How did you find the application process? Have you got any recommendations for anybody looking to apply in future rounds? I'll take everyone in turn. If I go, Amy, can I go to you first?
Yeah, I think my biggest piece of advice is to talk to the Triple Point team at every opportunity. They're there to help, and they're there to kind of ask a lot of questions. I think as a definite kind of early round project, we were definitely finding our feet in terms of and from an existing networks leaving in terms of what can work, what we need to put in, what we don't need to put in, what you kind of want, and yeah, going through the Triple Point assessors or their team was always really useful, and they're definitely there to help and answer any questions that you have. So that's my number one tip.
Thanks, Amy. Dan, any suggestions, recommendations from you?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't actually at the coalface of doing the application because we paid for a consultant to help us do that, but obviously it was there in terms of bouncing ideas off, go through. But my understanding from them certainly that I sort of reiterate the whole point here around keeping in regular contact with Triple Point. I mean, we've had absolutely no issues into Triple Point getting back quickly, answering questions quite straightforwardly, trying to be helpful at all times. I'm not just saying that because I'm on a webinar run by you, but they actually genuinely have been very, very helpful the whole way through. And I think that people want to make these projects happen. They want to try to enable these projects to happen. And I think there's an understanding that everyone knows that these projects are difficult to land. They're very complicated. There's a lot of different actors and players in this, and it's important really to keep that dialogue going with them, and that's what we've tried to do throughout the whole of the process. And I recommend anybody going through this process to don't hold back, get in touch.
Definitely. Jason, Liam, anything from your side to
add? Well, neither Jason or I were at OPDC in the pre-application process, so I can't really speak to that. But I'm just going to have to echo the others who have spoken before me and say with the post-application process, just keep engaging with Triple Point. I've found them like the others to be incredibly helpful and very responsive when we've needed help or support from them.
Yeah, I think the other thing I'd probably just add to that, and we are obviously in a mutual admiration society here, is that our relationships with Triple Point are ongoing and will be through the life of the grant, and we have found them really open, really collaborative, and these things are never easy. I'd echo what Dan said. We're already finding that the mechanics of the process does need ongoing interrelationships and work, and we're working collaboratively with Triple Point. So absolutely, it hasn't been a seamless process, but it's been very enabling and very collaborative, which is exactly what the industry needs in times like this.
Great, that's wonderful to hear. Ken, I think I will hand over to you to sort of sum up today, but I guess also give you the opportunity to ask a closing question if you'd like to.
Sam,
Put you on the spot a little bit there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I part of me says we should quit while we're ahead, right? I mean, ladies, gentlemen, your checks are absolutely in the post. Well, look, I mean, I guess a question from me, and a question I'm going to ask a similar panel at a different webinar next week is, we've spoken today about an application process. We've spoken about long-term aspirations, ambitions for the sector. I'd love to hear, really, talk to us about the next challenge, the next hurdle to overcome, or what really excites you about the new year. This is really complicated, big infrastructure, but it's also delivering really exciting outputs and outcomes in some fantastically different places like Handforth, places like Old Park and the East of London, the Olympic Park. So I'd love to hear from you. What does the next 6 or 12 months look like in the projects? We know we're going to be keeping in touch throughout that process. We know how collaborative it is, but we're not going to get together as this small group of 255 anytime again soon. So when we come back after Christmas, what's the next big job for each of you? Come on, Amy, ladies first, kick us off.
So I would say actually kind of maybe the most exciting things is yet to come. We've got the heat pump there, but actually in the new year, it should be kind of, fully commissioned, switched on, and actually delivering low carbon heat into the network, which for us is a real milestone. And then I think in the next kind of 12 months, we should have kind of the first run of trenches up to Pudding Mill Lane. And so it might be one of the most exciting things in the area, bar the ABBA Voyage Arena, if you've not been already. So hopefully we can rival that. Maybe not as many sequins, but
we'll hold you to that. And you need to know, if you know anything about me, I have definitely been to the ABBA Voyage Arena, and will again. Dan, tell us what's going on in Handforth in the new year. As a project manager, you'll be over this. What does 2024 look like for you?
Well, certainly in terms of Handforth, it's going to be there's two things. One is the acceleration of activity that will be happening across the site generally, because this is a new build site. Everything is ramping up with this, and I think any project manager starts to get excited when things start to ramp up into delivery, and that's the thing that we'll be moving towards. So that's the main thing. The other thing that I do sort of looking forward to, really, and I think if you work in carbon reduction and climate change for any period of time, you realise that engaging with stakeholders, getting them on board, getting them actually enthused by all this is actually something which is highly enjoyable, and is actually keeps you going. To see new stakeholders in that area, new councillors, new senior officers, etc., new developers, all trying to get on board with this agenda is, for me, is something that is extremely satisfying, and is something that keeps you going.
Awesome, thank you, Dan. And Jason, Liam, you've just announced this mega procurement process that's going to keep you busy for a little while yet. But what else does 2024 hold at OPDC?
Yeah, so as you say, next year for us on the heat network side of things is all about working our way through the procurement process. And I think the key message that we'd like to say is, while we're really excited about moving that element of the scheme into formal delivery and getting on board development and funding partner, what we are also looking to do, and what we are looking for in the marketplace, is innovation, because our aspirations are not just the delivery of the heat network. We're looking to make sure that we're delivering the Mayor's net zero targets in a way that is beneficial right across the scheme, across the socio-economic landscape. And if we can then have a network that is flexible and expandable beyond our red lines, that is serving the purpose of West London and Londoners more generally, and is to everyone's benefit. So I think that the key thing for us is we've got some pragmatics and really hard work, technical work to get through with the marketplace to agree our commercial terms across the piece. We're really excited about being in play and formalising our procurement, but we also want to make sure we're leveraging the best in class from the marketplace, and we're looking for those entities that can actually bring that same attitude to the project for us.
That's amazing, Jason. Thank you. I'm damning you with faint praise at the end, but I'm going to say as well, you win slide of the day for me. When I think of district heating, I think of a big infra that's right at the heart of addressing the systemic challenges that are facing all societies, and your slide that put DH alongside that kind of multi-energy vector, multi-infrastructure approach that OPDC are taking out there to the west of London, I thought captured that brilliantly well. And to think that in time you're going to deliver on those 56,000 jobs, those 26,000 new homes, that's so very cool indeed. That's pretty much it from me. So a big thank you then to Amy and to Bill, to Dan, to Jason and to Liam. Just imagine that all these brilliant projects, all these brilliant market transformation commitments might actually be delivered upon. Such is the thumping imperative of climate change, but a cost of living crisis. This would be transformational to the country if we can get all these projects and many more like them built out. We've got aspirations to continue with the fund for a good while yet, but of course the bigger picture, UK PLC's ambitions for district heating go very, very much further indeed. We must stop, I think, talking about the 18% that Chris Stark and the CCC came up with all those years ago as being our goal or our end game. That was a bold ambition, and it's still that, but it was a bold ambition at a time when there was a very different conversation about the other solutions that were going to comprise the 82%. That landscape is changing, and right now it feels that in projects of the scale of OPDC, in projects with the focus of Hanforth, that we're challenging some preconceived ideas about efficacy of heat networks in a whole different range of use cases. So I say sky's the limit, but of course someone's got to pay for all that, and the Green Heat Network Fund, brilliant though it is only going to go a tiny step of the way. The Heat Network Industry Council has predicted that something like £80 billion worth of private capital needs to come into the market if we're going to fulfill that extraordinary ambition. That's a number that's only trending upwards. When we started off on this journey with the GHNF in 2018, the number that we heard then was 22 billion. That's going to change, and I suspect we all agree which direction it's pointing. I mentioned that because we've got a big room of people, and I'm super keen to let you know about the next of these webinars next Tuesday, the 5th. In the morning from 10 till 12, we're going to be hearing from a number of different investors, each with money to spend in this super important sector. I can't promise you that it's going to be as engaging as it was today. Hearing about these projects is going to be differently so, but don't let anyone believe you that pound notes are dull. If the spending power of a pound note is precisely the same wherever you get it from, then the sources of capital and the role they're going to play in district heating market growth are really, really different. So come along and hear from a panel of different investors. Come and hear from DESNZ, come and hear from the UK Infrastructure Bank, but then hear from private equity investors, hear from industry, hear from private client fund managers around the specifics of their particular offering around their attitudes to risk, around their return requirements, around the different terms and tenors of their investment. It's going to be really different, I think really interesting, really compelling. Don't think for a second I haven't got all your names, addresses, emails. We know who you are, where you are. If you're not there on Tuesday, you're missing out, and we will be in touch. Today's been brilliant. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for coming along. A final thank you to our brilliant speakers. A final thank you for those incredibly kind words about the Triple Point team. I know none of that is directed at me. I know it's all towards that brilliant relationship management team. We started off with that reminder. Let's end with it as well. If you're contemplating an application at any point over the balance of the fund, if you just want to know more about the market transformation commitments, if you want to find out more about those standardized, templated sales, operations and maintenance contracts that are free source available from our website, please reach out to our relationship management team. Aside from that, I don't know if there's any more housekeeping, Sam, if I go back to you, but I will say a last goodbye.
Thank you, Ken, and thank you everyone for joining us. We will be distributing the slides and the recording via email, so keep an eye out for that. I will also provide a bit more information in the chat about how to contact us if you have any further questions. But thank you once again for joining us.